All right, so thank you for joining me for another day, another thought, another experience. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about optimism and success and how we cultivate some more positivity in our life and where exactly it can help us. For so many of us, as we move through life, the thing that ends up motivating us to move forward is when we're able to see the pieces of success. So it's like we're able to kind of visually see things moving forward in the way that we envision them. And when we see that, then we are motivated to take the next steps and either repeat the same formula or get the momentum to move forward. So, but for a lot of us, we do run into some areas where we're not seeing the results that we want to see. And then it begins to give us a sense of fatigue. We feel a sense of loss, or, we start taking it personal. And it's important to know that there's a couple components to life. So a couple components that make this work. And so we're going to tap into it a little bit today. So I heard this really powerful quote. And now again, we're doing memory. He said that sometimes we're too impatient to be intelligent. And what he means by that is that sometimes in life, we're so busy with being busy, and we're so busy with wanting to see results that we start getting impatient. And the impatience in itself is the thing that kind of gets us into trouble. A simple thing I experienced personally lately, where I was dealing with in business. I was dealing with a business deal. And part of me, did get impatient with certain things, and I start making different moves. And you get this kind of agmas nefesh, and kind of you start venturing out and doing the hishtadlus, right? We go out there, we put in the effort and to the best of our ability. And then it was like a 3-month kind of process in total. And it was something I invested in, something that was important to me. And it wasn't panning out the way I thought it would. And it helped me. It was going to kind of create this like final conclusion for me, right? There was going to be a final conclusion. And 5 minutes before I completely surrendered and was ready to let go, as in it wasn't working, and I was going to sign papers for something else. 5 minutes before that happened, I was in the middle of making dinner for my family, and the first guy called back, and turned out that everything was fine and everything was okay, and this whole ordeal that I had in place, which I ended up working on for like a month. I bothered different people. I had sleepless nights. I felt a huge sense of failure. It stacked up to nothing, to an actual nothing, where I didn't have to even do any of that. So I kind of was sitting and reflecting with myself, and I was like, okay, what is going on here? And when I heard that quote, is that we're too impatient to be intelligent, it hit me really hard, because I was like, okay, this is really powerful. That I was reflecting, and I found that there was a position where I was a little impatient, and my impatience ended up causing this domino effect of agony, personal agony. Now, besides for everything else, there's the siyata dishmaya component of all of this, of whatever's bashert is bashert, in the sense of even how much tsar, how much pain, how much you're gonna feel, right? And how much you're gonna experience. But then how much of it is something we actually cause ourselves, right? And that's kind of the trick. This is kind of what I want to talk about today is like, so I sat down with myself and I was like, okay, how much of this did I cause myself, right? So, and how, and more than all of that, what was that interior narrative that I kept saying to myself? Like, am I not successful? Am I not, am I out of luck? You know, like the little things. Am I trying to do something that's too big for me? That's out of my league? Am I delusional, right? Am I just dumb, you know? And I kind of stacked all of it up and thinking about it and then just looking at the action steps. And what I noticed was that there was a sense of impatience. And besides for the impatience, when I'm impatient, right? When there is that component of impatience, what happens? And it's interesting to see that this negative narrative shows up when I'm impatient. So it really told me a lot about my position and myself. And also, it told me a lot about not what anyone else does to me, but what I actually create for myself. So we all kind of create a little bit of hell for ourselves on a daily basis. So when we're trying to kind of shift into a more positive space, it's important to pay attention to what we're creating for ourselves, because as we do have a power to make life simpler and easier and more enjoyable. We have the ability to do that. So we're going to tap a little bit into some of those tools to see how we can kind of add some of that for ourselves today. So when we think about cultivating, let's say, optimism in general and positivity, I talk about this a lot of times where like our environment is shaped by the mindset, by our mindset, right? So it's external factors and then internal factors. There's like the component of like working for the ego, like this illusion of this person we want to be or this person we dream about being, and then there is the day-to-day and the practicality. It's really important to try to build an ecosystem for ourselves where it works for us, but we have to ask ourselves really truly, what is it that we want? And that's kind of what it boils down to. So if I ask you, like, what do you want? What do you want out of life? Really answering that question more than it being about physical things, right? Like, rather than it being about like money or status, focusing on an emotion of like what it is that you want. And if it's this joy and serenity, right? Or this simplicity, right? It's important to pay attention to those things and how we cultivate them. So number one, when we're trying to build a positive environment, positivity and optimism are both things that are also influenced by the people we surround ourselves with. If you want to create a positive mindset, you have to look at how the people in your life reflect on their own mindset. Like how do they talk about themselves? How do they talk about other people? Because people have the power of like uplifting us or really bringing us down. And for some of us, you know, we all have the people in our life that lean more negative than positive, and it's a reality. But when we're choosing to have a little bit more positivity, that internal narrative starts with us. It really starts with us and asking ourselves, what do you want? What do you want from that narrative? A simple example that I gave, or that I had this week, was that me and my daughter experienced an event, and there's this event, and it was interesting to see the simplicity in the event, which was incredible. But what I told my daughter was, this kind of approach really challenges my ego, right? This simplicity or this kindness. And it's interesting to see sometimes what that evokes within ourselves. Like when you see somebody choosing something different than you, right? I was like, wow, this really challenges my ego. I have needs. Like I have certain needs, and I would need more. And it was incredible to see how little this person was happy with. And it wasn't that it was with less, but they had different priorities in life. So when we're kind of focusing on our interior, we have to really be focused on what it is that your priorities are. So just really, really noticing if you had your top 3 priorities, if it's in life or in your day, really noticing what that focal point is will tell you everything about it. It won't tell you, it will put things into perspective. Like every time you kind of fall out of line with perspective, going back to your 3 most important, like your top priorities, will put things in line. So when you see, so for example, experiencing this thing, I was like, okay, this person has different priorities than me. And as soon as I went there, it didn't challenge my ego so much. And it was more of like accountability for the way that I live, even though, you know what I'm saying? And because we have such a big social circle and there's such a huge network, we're always involved in other people's lives. We're always comparing. We're comparing somebody else's happiness or somebody else's troubles, right, with our own. And the thing is think about how much you actually share with the public. And if you notice, in general, most of us don't share a lot of our struggles. Either you have your person that you talk to, or you kind of keep certain things to yourself, or you just work through them. So but if you're an optimistic person and you don't dump your stuff on everybody else, when people see you, they just assume that everything's always fine. But that only comes from a place where they're kind of in their own illusion, right? So if I'm in a place where I really reflect on myself and I know, okay, I have stuff going on, there's real challenges happening, and then there's showing up in the world. When I show up in the world and I see somebody else, I don't automatically think that the other person has it better than I do. Let's just put it that way. It's more of everybody's going through stuff. It's not about if somebody's going through more than you or less than you. It's just about trusting that even though we go through things, there's a way to approach the way we communicate. So when we are aware of that, then when we do see somebody or we see other people, we're not in this place where we're like, oh, they have it better than I do. And what happens is then you can kind of go back into the interior space and really work deeper on that interior of being like taking full accountability. Like this is back to like interior design. Like when we talk about space, right? Space is the environment that Hashem has given you, right? The stuff that we haven't chosen for ourselves. And every single one of us have come down to this world to do some work. And I actually lost a friend this week. I lost a friend that actually, it was very interesting because if I would talk about like perfection, all the boxes were checked. It was almost like there was no more for them to do in the sense of how amazing this person was. And he was younger than me. So it was fascinating to like observe. But we're all here to do something. We're all here to it's not about necessarily go through challenges, but make the place make the place we're in better, elevate the space. So that kind of also goes into like bringing light into every environment, and it takes effort. It takes effort to really have that change. And we're not talking about like this kind of cheesy kind of like, oh, I'm just going to smile everywhere I go and I'm going to like pretend everything's good. Acknowledging that there's effort, but really making that conscious choice of, no, I'm here to elevate this space. And if and I'm going to ask Hashem to give me the ability to elevate it. And the first few steps to get there is by first understanding that we're all like, everybody has struggles, everybody has their challenges, and everybody has what they're going through. It's the approach. It's when we're approaching it. Can I go to? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah, of course.
I missed what you said about that friend. What did you say? You lost a friend?
I lost a friend. Yeah,
like physically, she's physically out of this world, or you're no longer.
He died. He died. He was very young. And he died. But he was in a place where he achieved so many great things. Like, when I look at him as a person, there's like this completion there. There was this sense of like being completely like, there was a perfection there of sorts. And it's interesting because like for the ones of us that are like alive and moving forward, right? Like usually for most of us, we're facing many challenges. And like, as we go through life, it's about like, perfecting things, perfecting our own character. That's really what we're here to do. It's not about solving problems, because we get up every single day and there are challenges every single day. But more than that, it's about, what is my approach? Like when I see something, how do I approach it? And that's kind of the dynamic there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for popping in. So that kind of it's important to notice in that mindset of like where you are when it comes to these conditions, because what happens is when we shift into more of a positive space, what we're doing is it's making life more tolerable. Not only tolerable, but more enjoyable for ourselves. So the first thing that's, if you're kind of looking to notice, like, how do I handle things? How do I approach things? The first question you want to ask yourself is, how do I project my inner mindset? So what is my internal conversation? So like, think of the last challenge you had, and you can even write down literally the thoughts that come up, or the judgments, I would say, that come up. For me, for example, one of the things that I managed to shift was, instead of having like a negative narrative, when I face a challenge, new quotes or lines that actually show up in between all the negativity that shows up in the challenge is a few lines. And one of them is, I'm here now. So if I'm here now, I managed to get through so many other things. So if I've gotten through those things, I will get through this. That's number one. Number two, another thing that comes up for me as I sit and reflect is, I don't have all the details yet, right? So when a challenge shows up, a lot of times we don't have all the details. So it's really, the challenge isn't the challenge itself, but it's the decision making of, what am I going to do here? How am I going to do it? And we get impatient, right? This is where the lack of intelligence shows up, where we want to make decisions and we want to know what is going to happen and how it's going to happen, but we don't have enough patience to wait for all the details. So another thing I've learned is not to make decisions from a place where I don't have all the details. So now that I've been doing this work, and we've been doing this work for a while, right? I'm in a place where I really know when I have clarity, and the whole world can wait. And I will get pressure. Sometimes, like, make a decision. I need a decision from you. This is affecting me somehow. And I'm like, I don't have answers yet. I need to wait till I have the clarity, because I don't have all the facts. And it's interesting to see because, again, we're not always successful with this, like, all the time. But more often than not, if you start reconditioning yourself, you will come to a place where you'll find what your lines are. So for me, that was another one. To know that, like, I don't make decisions till I have the facts. Now, I don't make decisions about what I'm going to do, but I also don't make judgments about myself. And that's an interesting one as well, because the one of the first things that happen is this negative talk towards yourself. Like, come on, like you're so weak, like you're so dumb, like all the things that come up, like you're so unorganized, like whatever it is that comes up, as in just extra nonsense that just doesn't help the situation, right? So noticing what those things are, and if we are able to quiet those noises and have our few lines, right? Take some time to reflect and ask yourself, like, shifting the conversation and reframing the perspective. You can have a few lines. You can either have a note, or, like, I find notes on my phone is really great. And you have these lines, and every time you kind of run into a challenge, you go to the notes and you read, or you have an audio message that you have for yourself. And knowing that for myself, it's like, okay, being in this challenge has nothing to do with, like, it being my fault or not my fault. This is the next step of the journey. So also when we're growing in life and we're evolving, this is part of it, where there will constantly be new things that show up. So if something shows up in our life, it has something to teach us. So that is another thing. So it's just, I find that taking the time to write it down when you're outside of the challenge itself can really help support you in the challenge itself. And after you repeat it a few times to yourself, like, and you repeat this kind of new habit and introduce it to your experience, the entire thing starts to shift and it just becomes second nature. But that's kind of what it means by, like, bringing the light or bringing in that positivity into it. And it kind of softens the whole approach. From a scientific perspective, when we're in a place where we have high cortisol, when we are stressed and we're in that fight or flight mode, we get this, like, memory loss. Our perception becomes very, 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 very small, where we're not able to see much. We're only hyper focused on that one thing in front of us. And it's like, the analogy is as simple as, like a movie set. What's going on camera is actually not what's actually going on. If you step away from the camera or the lens itself, you will see hundreds of people on a crew. The location is all staged. You will be able to see all the details that go into making this production happen. And when we are in that fight or flight, it's much, much harder for us to see that. So when we're able to relax into ourselves, right? So shifting the narrative, shifting the perspective also brings that cortisol level down. We're able to relax into the space, and then our perception opens up. And once that perception opens up, we're able to see the nuance as well. And we're able to see that things are not as straightforward as they seem, but we allow life to kind of do its natural thing. We also find patience within ourselves. So that's really, really important to remember. So that's like the internal. The external is, when we're reflecting on this, is asking yourself, who in my life contributes to the sense of optimism? So noticing, like, who brings positivity out of you and who brings the negativity out of you. Just noticing that. how do I currently express positivity in my daily life? So notice if you talk about the good things that happen or the positive wins, because these are really important things to communicate. I always say, for myself, I have a rule that if there's somebody that I complain to about something, it's my job to make sure that that person knows when I've resolved the situation. Because people aren't only there to hear about our challenges, they're also here to hear about, to celebrate with us. And sometimes, like going back to like the top of it where we were talking a little bit about, like, for us, a lot of times we feel like we need to let people know that we had a hard day or a hard time, because if not, they won't believe it. They won't believe us. A lot of us come from places either when we're younger that we had to like really prove ourselves, or the adults in our life um, kind of communicated that their life was more challenging than ours. And again, not judging it at all, but just noticing where that mindset comes from. So we come from this place where we have to let others know that, you know, we aren't lazy, and we did something today, and we are working hard, right? Even if we're not getting the acknowledgement. So rather than kind of listing um the negatives, we talked a couple weeks ago about adding value. So in this space, it's the similar kind of aspect where you start reinforcing value, where instead of saying to the person, you know, I went through this challenge today, you could say, you know, I overcame this today. um, I really learned so much about myself as I went through whatever. And shifting the narrative of how you communicate your challenges can also make a huge difference. So thank you so much for joining me in this experience today. Yeah, I really appreciate it that you all showed up.